In this video, the learning target I'm going to talk about is I can solve geometry word problems using quadratic functions. So if you look at the first one here, it says I have 24 feet of fencing and I want to make a rectangular garden with an area of 35 square feet. What should the dimensions of the garden be? Okay, so on almost all of these problems, you kind of want to draw a picture to get an idea of what's going on here. So we're making a rectangular garden. So say this is my garden and I want the area to be 35 square feet. Okay. Now I'm limited to 24 feet of fencing. So over here, I'm going to write fencing and I'm going to keep track of how much fencing I have left. So to start, I have 24 feet of fencing. Okay. Now a rectangle, you need to remember these sides have to be equal length and these two sides have to be equal length. Okay, so let's say I make the width here x. Well, then this side also has to be an x, right? And that x is representing some amount of fencing. Okay, so out of my 24 feet of fencing, I'm going to use some x amount on this top width side, and then that has to be the same amount that I put on the bottom side. I don't know what x is yet, but I'm just putting x as the variable. Okay. Now, if I've used some X amount and then I've used some on the bottom, that means out of the fencing in total, I have subtracted 2x from it. Okay, I don't know what x is, but I've taken out some x amount twice. Okay, so this is what's left of my fencing after I lay it down on these two sides. Now, you'll notice I need to figure out how much fencing I'm going to put on the question mark side. Well, after I've laid out the X amount of fencing, I'm left with this, right? So if this is my remaining amount, I need to take out of my remaining amount, I need to put the remaining amount on these two sides. Okay, I have to split this in half. Half of it has to go here, and half of it has to go there. So what I do is I take my remaining amount of fencing, and I simply just divide by 2 because it's going to get split between the two sides. Now, when I do this, 2 is getting divided out of both numbers, right? I'm taking half of 24 and half of 2. Well, half of 24 is 12, and half of 2 is 1. So I get 12 minus x. So the height here, or the length, so to speak, is 12 minus x, and this one would be 12 minus x. Okay? Now, to calculate the area of a rectangle, remember, area equals your base times your height. Okay, so they're telling me that the area needs to be 35 feet squared. So I'm going to write 35 for the area. That's when I take the base, which is x, and I multiply by the height, which is 12 minus x. Okay, or width times length, depending on what you're thinking of it as. So I'm taking x times 12 minus x. Okay. Now, whenever you take something times a parentheses, remember you can distribute it. So I'm going to distribute this in, and I'm going to get 35 equals 12x minus x squared. Now, you'll notice this is a standard form quadratic equation, right? I have multiple x's, I have an x squared, and x in a constant term. So I want to get everything onto one side. So I'm going to add x squared to both sides, and I'm going to minus 12x from both sides. That's going to give me then x squared minus 12x plus 35 equals 0, okay? This is the equation I want to solve the problem. So off to the right here, I'm going to solve it. I'm going to take x squared minus 12x plus 35 equals 0, and I'm going to factor this guy down. So if I factor this, remember the first times the first gives me my first term, which is x times x. And then the last times the last has to give me my last. Okay, so multiplying to 35, well, that's 1 and 35. It could also be 5 and 7. I want to get a negative 12 in the middle. Well, I can see that 5 and 7 are my best options to do that. I just need negative 5 and negative 7. Okay, negative 5 times negative 7 is positive 35. And if I check the inside and the outside, I'll get negative 5x and negative 7x, which combines to give me negative 12. Okay, so this is the correct factor. Once I have it factored, I set both of my factors equal to 0. and I solve them. So I get x equals 7 or x can equal 5. It can be either one. Okay, so when it says what should the dimensions of the garden be, if I let the width be 7, okay, so the width equals 7 feet. Well, if you check the other one, if the width is 7, that means this x is 7, and if I take 12 minus 7, that's giving me the 5. So then the length would have to be 5 feet. Okay, so either the length or the width has to be 7 and 5 feet. Okay, those would be your two answers. All right, let's look at one more example here. So number 2, we're given a triangle, and it says find the value of x if the triangle's area is 75 square feet. So a triangle's area is equal to half the base times the height. Okay, you should know this from geometry. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to plug my base, which is x, in for b, and I'm going to plug the height, x minus 5, in for the h. So I get the triangle's area equals 1/2 times x minus 5. And remember, they're telling me the area is 75 square feet, so I get 75 equals 1/2 x times x minus 5. Now, I don't like dealing with this fraction, so what I can do is I can actually multiply both sides by 2. When I do this, 1/2 times 2 will just be 1, right? Or they'll cancel each other. And I'll be left with x times x minus 5. And then 75 times 2 is 150. Now I can distribute the x without worrying about the half. And I'll get x squared minus 5x equals 150. Once again, this is a standard form quadratic. So I can just minus the 150 to get everything on one side. That's going to give me 0 equals x squared minus 5x minus 150. And then I can solve this guy by factoring. So if I factor it, x times x gives me x squared. I need two numbers that multiply to negative 150 and give me negative 5 in the middle. So if I think about 150, well, that's 1 and 150. That's 2 and 75, 3 and 50, 5 and 30. Let's see, what else are there? Oh, 10 and 15 is another one, right? And so I'm looking at these list of numbers and I'm trying to find a pair that's going to give me negative 5. Now, I notice that 10 and 15 are 5 apart, so that's probably the pair I'm trying first. I want a negative 150 and I want a negative 5 in the middle. Okay, so what that tells me is because I want the negative in the middle, I'm going to make the bigger number negative and the smaller number positive. Negative 15 times 10 is negative 150. And then I get negative 15x plus 10x is the negative 5x. Okay, I can set both of my factors equal to 0, equals to 0, and then just solve them. So on the left side, I get x equals 15. On the right side, I get x equals negative 10. Okay, x equaling negative, or x equaling 15 is the answer. X equals negative 10 is incorrect, and the reason why is you can't have a length that is negative, right? We have to be positive here. So it's going to be x equals 15 is the value of x. Okay, so what that means then is my base here is 15 feet, and then the height would be 15 minus 5, which would be 10 feet. And then if you calculated that, base times height is 150, but if you take half of 150, you get the 75 square feet, so it checks out. So your x should be 15 feet. Okay, hopefully these videos are helpful when using quadratic functions to solve geometric word problems.